Welcome back to the last blame game of Worlds to feature Western teams. Now, as much as it pains me to say that, it doesn't pain me at all to mention the fact that the blame game is sponsored by Acer Predator, the official sponsor of the League of Legends 2017 World Championship. The monitors are used for all of the competitions, so you know they're pretty if they're being used by the pros. Now, without any further ado, let's talk about how the West was lost. Let's talk about the series that is closer to my heart and was closer in games with C9's loss to WE. They not only were up 2-1 and lost, but a lot of fans felt like the final defeat in Game 5 came as a result of a bad draft. Now, is this the typical fan overreaction to draft, or was there actually a big mistake this time? When it comes to drafting versus LPL teams, it's pretty obvious that Galio is a premier pick for the region, and if you leave it up, you are basically saying that you better have some strategy prepared to beat it, otherwise I think it's fair to view it as a mistake. Over the course of the first 4 games, Galio had been banned every time, but interestingly, by every team on blue side, meaning that WE had actually banned it twice themselves. It's also important to note that this was their last ban on blue side both times. This is why I don't think it's fair to blame C9 for banning Rumble with their second to last ban, because according to what had been happening earlier, Galio will be banned with the last blue ban. This time, however, as we know, WE decides to leave it up, and it puts C9 in a tough last ban position where they need to pick between banning Xayah, Mystic's most played and arguably best champion, and Galio, which, as we just said, all LPL teams are great with. Perhaps because the J4 ban already existed, C9 felt like there was less of a priority on Galio and decided to keep Mystic onto Caitlyn or Kog'Maw, both of which they had already beaten in the series, and in Game 1, I would say they basically already beat it then too, but we'll get there later. It's also a possibility that something happened like what happened to Koma, the coach of SKT one time. Small note, I wish people would actually look at series trends and pick ban for reasons why this stuff can happen, as opposed to just saying, oh my god, Galio's up. Anyways, as a result, Galio gets through, but WE decides to first pick the Janna instead. C9 decided to secure themselves a winning bot lane and take away the Caitlyn, and then grab the best jungler left up with the Jarvan ban in Sejuani. Now, in terms of actual champion priority, I actually do think this is an understandable trade for Galio. The problem comes when you start factoring all the synergies that exist. WE take Galio and Kog'Maw with their last 2 picks in the first phase and end up with a god tier disengage comp with Janna, Galio, Kog'Maw. You throw Gragas into the second phase and goddamn WE have a good disengage comp. This problem is exacerbated by the fact that the rest of C9's comp doesn't really find good backline threat. Sejuani, Ori, Shen can potentially dive a Kog'Maw if they're far ahead and blow him up through the defensive that WE have, but it does 100% require you to be playing from ahead. This means it's 100% on C9's bot lane to smash, which they can potentially do with the Caitlyn Lulu, but a gank or 2 by Condi pressures them and it makes them fall behind and not actually smash bot lane. This allows WE's bot lane to hit their Ardent power spike a little bit sooner and start winning the bot lane as well. C9 eventually find a good engage onto the bot lane and punish 3 for 0, but this entire time the Gnar counter pick, which we haven't even hit on yet, was split pushing down the top side and was able to take away some objectives for his team. WE move into the mid game slightly ahead, and despite some great engages by C9, honestly, you can see how futile the attempts are when you compare the 2 comps to each other, as the Kog'Maw can basically live through a wombo at full health. The barrier of execution for C9 to win this game basically required them to play perfectly around bot lane, which is just way too much to be accepted, so the draft blame is 100% on point. However, I have to say that I would put more blame on the Game 1 loss than the Game 5 one. It's basically impossible to win every draft in the series, and losing a game when you're playing from behind due to a draft mistake is more acceptable than losing a game where you smash the draft and are winning in games and still lose it. You need to factor into account that C9 had won 3 or 4 drafts and could have potentially 3-0'd this series if their level of execution was matching their level of drafting early on in the series. Game 1, they have nearly a 6k gold lead at 20 minutes in before taking some bad mid-game skirmishes in the 4v5 around Baron, and then despite their comp getting outscaled, they still have an opportunity to pick off the Kog'Maw and win the game, but Smoothie doesn't end up using his ult. If he ults the Jarvan going in, the CC lands on the Kog'Maw, it keeps the Caitlyn alive, or you just ult the Caitlyn and you keep him up. Now, Sneaky died faster than anyone could have expected, but at the same time, this pick is the most important thing that can happen in this game, so you need to blow all your resources to get that pick. These mistakes in Game 1 eventually force a situation where there's a Game 5, and WE finally figure their shit out and make some good mid-series adaptations and finally hard win one draft. Moving on to Fnatic versus RNG, once again, we're talking about the draft. I wouldn't keep doing it if the fans were talking about something else, but here we are again. Before Game 4, Fnatic had won 2 early games and lost those games, and the game they did win, they lost the early games and then came back and won it, which is really not a reliable win condition. So, moving into Game 4, I can understand on the idea of doubling down the early game and winning the game as fast as possible. This is also smart given RNG's playstyle of waiting for Uzi to come online and hard carry the game. Their team comp leaves them with 1.5 damage dealers about, 3 winning and pushing lanes, and the best jungler in the meta, arguably. I fail to see how at all this is a bad draft. Teams all over the world are using team comps like this to snowball early game. They can move the Galio to either winning side lane to blow the game open. Now I understand sometimes you want a better scaling AD carry like a Kog'Maw here or perhaps a Xayah, but we've seen Bang on Varus and it's not like this champion is useless later in the game. This is also before mentioning that they have the split push Gnar win condition if that champion gets ahead. And in-game, things are going great. They get a counter gank off on the top side with the use of a TP, they get a dive down the bot lane which takes summoners and gets a kill, and it looks like Fnatic is about to blow this game open. They are about to snowball the game by diving the summonerless bot lane of RNG before Caps loses his mind somehow and runs through mid lane at no HP. Corki then flashes on top of him and kills him. Think about the last time that you saw a Galio get solo killed before 10 minutes by a Corki. Just think about it. This comp should have absolutely obliterated the early game, but Caps died the exact moment that Fnatic was about to break RNG's back. As a result, 13 minutes into the game, the bot lane turret is still standing, and when Fnatic go to make their dive down the bot lane, they get punished. They don't fully respect the timing window difference between when Gnar has pressure on the Shen and they can threaten the dive, and when they don't have pressure on the Shen and he can ult on top of a Corki with the package. This results in a ton of kills going RNG's way and stalls out the early game, allowing them to outscale the comp that Fnatic have. The blame for this draft is 1,000,000% off. I also saw a lot of complaints about Reckless's build where he goes 3rd item GA, and I agree, that's pretty bad when you're the sole damage threat. You need to play as aggressively as possible because you're your team's win condition. Now that said, if you're complaining about the 3rd item power spike with a comp like Fnatic has, you probably already lost the game. Not snowballing was the big issue here. The High 5 Comment of the Week award is brought to you by my patrons Dan Thompson and Distrack and goes to Callie Carno. The comment itself isn't anything special, it's post a funny reaction to C9 losing, but the video, my God, the video, how are people so bad at tic-tac-toe? I'm getting physically violent watching these guys go. That does it for this episode of The Blame Game, and with all the Western teams out, it is now time to pick your next favorite team. Personally, I'm going with RNG just because Uzi's been denied twice in the finals and I would love to see him finally get that trophy in his home country of China. Let me know who you guys are now rooting for in the comments below and why. I'll catch you guys next time. I love Worlds, but thank God we are down to now just 2 days a week. I get my life back, but I'm still nocturnal.